Thanks for joining us on a special edition of Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. Tonight is the latest in our series, WTTW News, A Safer City. Every Monday in July and August, we're devoting our entire program to the issues of public safety and community safety as well. We'll also be prioritizing public safety in our online coverage, including at WTTW.com/safercity. Tonight, a deep dive into the impact of violence on the mental health of the city's communities. And here's what we're looking at. A deadly weekend in Chicago, but new data shows an overall decrease in homicides across the city. What leaders say is behind the drop. It's been almost 2 years since gun violence was declared a public health crisis in Illinois. What that means in reality.
Can't help change the community if I'm still living the same way I was living a few years back.
Inside an organization tackling violence by working to transform lives. And the hidden scars of violence, a look at the impacts on mental health. All that and more right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors. Chicago Tonight's coverage of public safety is supported by the Su Ling Jin Charitable Foundation Initiative for Reducing Violence in Chicago.
Chicago police say 5 people were killed by gunfire over the weekend, but this weekend's violence follows the release of new CPD data that found homicides have been trending downward. WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. Matt, what do we know about homicides and other crimes for the first 6 months of this year compared to last year?
Those numbers have been going down, as we said, compared to the first 6 months of last year. There's been 301 homicides through the first 6 months of this year. That's down about 6% compared to the same time last year. The number of shootings recorded is also down about 6%, while the number of people who have actually been shot is down about 10%. But these figures have been growing closer together. These gaps have been closing as the year's gone on. June 2023 alone saw 66 homicides. There were 67 in June of 2022. And through the end of March, the first quarter of this year, homicides were down 15% and shootings were down about 13%. So those numbers have gotten closer to last year's levels as the year has gone on.
Summer months, of course, tend to be the most violent months. So what does CPD and other city officials say led to the overall drop, though, so far this year, albeit small?
Police haven't pointed to one specific thing that's dropped these homicide and shooting rates this so far this year, but interim police superintendent Fred Waller is always crediting the work of his police officers, some of whom have had their days off canceled on weekends throughout the summer. Since Mayor Brandon Johnson took over this year, he's also stressed the importance of working with street outreach and community groups to try to create safe spaces throughout the summer months as violence has historically increased.
Meanwhile, the future of the department is coming into view later this week. The Community Commission tasked with finding 3 finalists for the new superintendent. They're going to come out with their 3 finalists. So what are the next steps? When is that going to happen? So
we'll know those finalists this week. On Thursday, this commission is set to announce these finalists after this long search for a new superintendent to replace Waller on a full-time basis. That 53 people had initially applied for this, and they're reportedly already down to 6 finalists. Those include Larry Snelling, who's the chief of CPD's Bureau of Counterterrorism, former Deputy Chief Ernest Cato III, Deputy Chief Migdalia Bolnis, Constitutional Policing and Reform Chief Angel Navales, Commander Donna Rowling, and Sean Barnes, who leads the police department in Madison, Wisconsin. So once the commission is down to these final 3, they present those to Johnson, who then will have 30 days to come up with his pick of those.
Or if he doesn't like any of them, he can send it back and have them start the process over. All right, Matt Masterson, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Matt's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Up next, treating violence as a public health crisis, what that means right after this. It's been almost 2 years since Governor J.B. Pritzker signed an executive order declaring gun violence a public health crisis in Illinois. This was part of the state's Reimagining public safety program, which pushes $250 million in funds to the state's hardest hit communities. It's a 3-year investment that started at the end of 2021, designed with the intention of interrupting and preventing gun violence. So What exactly has this looked like so far? Joining us to check in on this program and gun violence as a public health crisis are Yolanda Fields, Executive Director of Breakthrough Urban Ministries, which operates out of East Garfield Park, and State Representative Justin Slaughter, who represents the 27th District, which includes communities on Chicago's South Side. He was the House sponsor of this Reimagined Public Safety Act. Thank you both for being here. First, Representative Slaughter, with you. You sponsored this bill. How is this approach different than previous approaches taken by the General Assembly?
First of all, Paris, thanks for having me on. I think Yolanda and I are extra excited to be the first guest of your A Safer City series, so thanks for having us on. What we wanted to do with this was take a bold, transformative approach to look at crime and violence from a public health crisis and to look at the root causes of crime and violence. So what that meant for us is, first we established a new office, an Office of Firearm Prevention. And what we did with that was we wanted to coordinate all of the programs, services, resources, and initiatives out of the state in terms of looking at how we both partner and collaborate with state agencies, but also in an intergovernmental way, how do we partner with the city?
So you have someone staffed in that office now, or people staffed in that office that are directing some of these investments?
That's correct.
And Yolanda Fields at Breakthrough, what does this look like on the ground? How much money have you received, and what are you using it for?
Yeah, we are slated to receive over $700,000 over the 3-year period, and we're using it to help reduce homicides and shootings in our neighborhood. And it isn't just that, it is providing holistic services. And so that means street level intervention as well as youth and education development.
All those things kind of tie in together, and we should mention that earlier today we spoke with Pastor Anthony Williams, who had been calling for years on lawmakers to declare violence a public health epidemic. Here's what he had to say.
The same feverish process that our government and others took with COVID, we need to take that same energy as it relates to violence. We've got to educate people to what this is. It is not just about a gun. Put that to the side. There's enough gun legislation on the books. We've got to address it properly. We need mass education. We need workshops. We need to educate the public what this sickness is, what this disease is.
We should mention that Reverend Williams lost his own son to violence. So Representative Slaughter, does this initiative represent this feverish approach that he's asking for here?
It most definitely does. And one of the things that we want to prioritize with this is the robust services approach, right? So how do these programs look? It could be job training. It could be after school programs. It could be mental health services, high risk intervention services, case management, and also taking a smart approach. So looking at those areas that are at risk, some of those the hot areas around not just the city, but also throughout the state as well.
And I should mention, some viewers might remember in 2014 there was the Neighborhood Recovery Initiative by Governor Pat Quinn, which had all kinds of problems. So how do you measure the success of this and ensure that money's not going to go to the wrong thing or be wasted like that program was?
Paris, it's such a great question. At the center of this is an effort to ensure that we are embracing emerging practices, embracing best practices. And so what we're doing is ensuring that we do get those results. There's a robust research component to this. Loyola, UIC, the University of Chicago Crime Lab, Northwestern University, also Chicago State, which is in my neck of the woods, are all at the table making sure that we do the research and measure the success and impact and effectiveness of these programs.
Yolanda Fields, when we say treating violence as a public health issue, what does that look like on the ground from the perspective of an organization like yours?
Yeah, I think many things. It is a comprehensive approach. It is taking people who best know how to serve their community and using proven strategies to do that. So whether we're talking about being available for students in after school and providing safe spaces in the evening hours, or whether we're talking about street level intervention or a food pantry that cares for the basic needs, a public health approach means that we're interested in the total community and the total human being.
And you mentioned some of the programs that this funding had provided for. Can you get into some of the specifics here, some of the things you're able to do now that you maybe wouldn't have been otherwise?
Yeah, I think we're excited that we're able to provide workforce development opportunities for those who are re-entering our community. We're able to provide case management and to support whether you are a victim or someone who is on the peripheral in our community and been marginalized economically. This money allows us to meet some of those basic needs.
Representative Slaughter, we mentioned it's $250 million over 3 years allocated. How much so far has gone out? How much yet to go?
Right, so $250 million over 3 years. And let me say this represents the largest investment in the state's history in terms of violence prevention efforts. We've seen 120 million approximately committed to community providers so far. So another 130 million that we're trying to get out the door. 180 grants have gone out. 34 notice of funding opportunities have gone out. So we've been very, very busy. Compliments to the leadership of the governor's administration, and also the lieutenant governor's office as well has been at the forefront.
And Yolanda, you heard a little earlier, some of the violence numbers have gone down a little bit. How much investment do you think the city needs or the state needs to make into these kinds of programs to see that drop much more over the long term?
Yeah, I think we need committed investments in our communities. I always like to remind people that Chicago is 77 neighborhoods, and the most violence is happening in about 22 of them. 14 to 15 of them are seeing the most violence. It is a problem that we can solve with investment over the long haul. And so we need to see commitment from our government.
Investment, and as you mentioned, Representative, targeted investment that's based on research and metrics. Well, we appreciate both of you being here to discuss this. Representative Justin Slaughter, Yolanda Fields, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
And one organization is working to end gun violence in Chicago 1 week at a time. Tonight we take you inside an operation providing young men opportunities to change their lives beyond the streets. Joanna Hernandez joins us now with more. Joanna.
In Paris, for the last 7 years, the organization Chicago Cred has been tackling gun violence. They believe the solution to ending it starts with the individual, guiding them through therapy and education.
How do you finesse your life? Well, we talked about it starts with your mentality.
It's a packed group session inside one of Cred's 9 locations. Over several months, participants like Darvell Barnes engage in a program to change their lives.
A lot of the violence in the city has caused me to feel like I need to make a change within myself in order to be able to make a change within my community.
Barnes grew up on the Southwest Side. Over the years, he says, he lost more than 7 friends to gun violence.
Was there a point that you thought you were about to lose your life?
Several times. Several times. I got shot when I was 15. Very scary situation. I got chased quite a few times in my teenage years, being shot at.
Billy Moore, the alumni manager at Cred, knows the difficult journey these young men face. After serving nearly 20 years in prison, he now helps others transform their lives.
People come from a set of circumstances that may reduce opportunities or not give you so much access to what other people may have access to make better decisions.
According to Cred, nearly 75% of gun violence takes place in 20 of the 77 Chicago communities. Most of those areas are on the south and west sides.
You're never going to eliminate people from using guns and shooting people, but we do want to get to a point where people feel safer.
The program takes recruits through a variety of stages, from therapy to life coaching, services that many in the program say they've never had easy access to.
I just used to hold so much in, it's just like I would lash out at the wrong person or something like that. But it's just now that I'm able to really communicate and express my feelings and thoughts the right way. So it's just I'm just been cool, really.
25-year-old Stephen Thompson is now in a wheelchair after being shot 3 times. He says growing up in tough circumstances led him down the wrong path, a version of himself he wants to leave behind.
Getting to Chicago Cred, it's just it just helped shift my focus back into reality. But it's more positive. I know how to self-regulate. Yeah, I'm not even trying, like I'm down there healing.
One of CRED's focuses is to provide people with mental health services, one-on-one counseling, among other workshops.
They haven't really faced the mental health issues that they're really dealing with, the trauma that has been packed into their life from children all the way up to young adulthood.
Only 6 months into the program, Darvell Barnes says he's changing the course of his life.
How would you describe living a few years back? What was life like?
It was hard. It was hard. Just trying to keep myself safe and out of trouble. It seemed like it was getting harder and harder on a daily basis.
Breaking generational cycles is what Barnes says he is driven to do with his children.
Growing up, it wasn't like extremely encouraged in our communities that fathers should, you know, make the necessary changes in their lives to ensure that they'll be there for their kids. All of the time and attention I wanted as a kid, I can now give my kids.
We're told that more than 1,000 people have benefited from Chicago CRED's programming, with the goal of continuing to create an impactful change to ensure that spaces like this are safe for the community. Reporting live from Austin, I'm Joanna Hernandez. I send it back to you.
All right, Joanna, very compelling stories there. Thanks very much. And we're going to continue this discussion right now by looking at some of the hidden scars of violence, the toll that living or working under a constant threat of violence has on mental health. Exposure to violence is traumatic for everyone involved and can cause both immediate and long-term psychological damage, leading to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, sleep and substance abuse disorders, and even suicide. And joining us to discuss these difficult issues are Catherine Bocanegra, clinical social worker and assistant professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago; Donald Tyler, psychologist and director of clinical services at Chicago CRED, the violence prevention organization that we just saw; and Alexa James, CEO of NAMI Chicago, part of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Thank you all for being here. Donald Tyler, I'll start with you. Listening to the stories of some of those young men, tell us about the toll that what they have experienced in their lives can take on their mental health.
Well, you could see from, listening and hearing what they had to say that the gun violence has a tremendous impact on them physically, emotionally, psychologically. And so it's definitely a lot to go through. And really the difficulty begins with most of our young men early in life, and young women as well, right, where they experience all sorts of disadvantage from early childhood on. Right, and so then the gun violence begins when they're exposed to that. It just really compounds the level of the amount of chronic stress as well as trauma that they experience. Pretty much everyone in our program has several loved ones who've died from gun violence. Most of them have witnessed numerous shootings and killings. Many of them have been shot themselves and shot and killed others, which is also a very traumatic experience. And so it's a heavy load, right, that they bear. It
would seem to me that kind of trauma requires some kind of treatment to really cope with. So what is the best approach, Catherine Bocanegra, when you're dealing with kids that have experienced this?
Absolutely. So we have a bereaved city. If you think about the 315 homicides that have occurred as of July 8th in the city, they say that every homicide victim leaves behind 7 to 10 family members or close friends deeply impacted by their loss. So just in this year, we have 2,200 bereaved Chicagoans. So what we know works is community-based, accessible behavioral health care that addresses some of the structural barriers to access. So insurance access, provided regardless of one's immigration status, criminal legal contact, financial status. These are some of the structural barriers that we know that impedes access to services, but we also know that we need more services in the city. We have behavioral health centers, public behavioral health centers that need to be reopened by the city to address these structural barriers and increase access to care for our bereaved city.
Alexa James, I'm struck by one of the young men saying that he's learned how to regulate his emotions a little better. Is a lot of this, just built up anger that young people, when they experience this or when they're in this environment, they just don't know how to deal with, or they just don't know how to express in a healthy way?
Sure, but you would be too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Right.
No,
I mean,
no
I
doubt
think
about
that
it.
it's like feeling disenfranchised, feeling like you have seen horror in your community always, feeling unsafe to step outside, feeling unsafe to allow your kids to play outside, this feeling that you lack freedom in a place that you're supposed to have ownership. I think absolutely creates a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety. Also, the young man spoke about not being hopeful. You know, when you don't think that you're going to get to a certain age because of the statistics that are flooding your communities, there's also a high likelihood of mental health issues impacting you. And what that does to your body too is like really reduce overall health. So access to mental health care is important, but also making sure that we have access to general health care so people feel like they can treat what's now going to become chronic diabetes, cancer, heart disease, et cetera, that constant stress that's building up in your body.
And Donald Tyler at CRED, you and your colleagues are out there dealing with some of these young folks, but I'm sure that you have met folks that perhaps lost their lives. So how do you take care of your mental health when you're in this situation every day?
Well, it's definitely difficult at times, but we're so committed to this mission that we're moving forward to try to save as many lives as we can. But it definitely requires a lot of support. You know, we have to access mental health services ourselves to continue to do this work. I was sharing earlier that we've lost more than 30 young people since we started in 2016. Most of them were killed by gun violence. Some of them died from accidents, some of them from drug overdoses. And so to be able to do this work with individuals who are exposed to constant severe threat to their lives on a daily basis is difficult work. We develop relationships, you know, and to lose them is traumatic for us as well. And so we do our best to take care of ourselves, and we have to do a better job with that, but we're pushing forward.
And Catherine Bocanegra, you actually did a study on violence prevention workers and how their mental health is. Can you tell us the results of that?
Absolutely. So Representative Slaughter mentioned some of the research universities at the table. UIC is one of them, which I represent. And I did an in-depth study of interviewing community violence intervention workers and their supervisors around the kinds of traumatic stress they experience. And we discovered that not only do they have a significant trauma burden coming into the work, we're sending them right back to the communities and the context in which that trauma originated. So there's an urgent need for us to take care of frontline workers who are putting their lives on the line every single day to save a life in the city. And we don't want to burn them out. We don't want to ruin a life while somebody's trying to save a life.
Alexa James, speaking of frontline workers, you have worked with police officers because let's not forget that when they're in the line of fire, there's trauma that they experience. So how has that program gone? What should the public know about the state of mental health among police officers?
If you look at best practice anything, when you're talking about frontline workers, they have to also gain a lot of self-care so that they can de-escalate themselves. You don't want somebody who's an officer, I've said this, who's at a 10 walking in to de-escalate a situation. And I think it's really important to Donald's point that your values align with the mission of the organization. And I think that has gotten complicated for a lot of first responders, that they don't necessarily feel like their values align with the agencies. And that can make their wellness seem like less of a priority, for example. So yeah, it's critical that all of us that are healers in this city make sure that we have insight and self-regulation ourselves, because we're exploiting then our own lived experience to help others, to your point, and we're just going to become a sicker city if we do that.
You know, Donald, one of the things that brought up here a couple of times is there's just so many folks that you're working with, they don't feel like there's any hope for them. They don't feel like there's any light at the end of the table. How do you counsel them through that when it can be tough out there? It can be tough to sort of cling to any kind of hope that things will change.
Absolutely, and helping them develop hope is really the first thing we really need to establish, in addition to really establishing a strong relationship. But we have so many men and women who work for us who used to be in their shoes, right? Who used to be involved with gangs and violence in their earlier days of their life, and they've since changed and become ambassadors for peace. And so they're living examples that this absolutely can happen. And we also work really on a weekly basis, a daily basis, to establish non-aggression and peace agreements in our communities. And when they establish those type of agreements, they get to experience a period of respite from the ongoing violence, at least in terms of particular groups they may be.
Do those peace agreements typically hold?
Well, it's a process to maintain them, but absolutely, right? And so sometimes they don't, but we work to reestablish them.
And Catherine Bocanegra, there are certain neighborhoods where we have seen results, where violence has come down, where there are active violence prevention programs going on. So what can the whole city learn from that?
That street intervention is a critical component of the public safety ecology of the city. It's not an either this or either that they must be engaged. They are integral. They work collaboratively with other community stakeholders like our previous guests, and they can coexist and collaborate with law enforcement as well.
All right, so very important work that you're all doing. We appreciate you sharing your insights with us. Catherine Bocanegra, Donald Tyler, Alexa James, thank you so much. And that is our show for this Monday night. Join us again next Monday for the next program in this series, and be sure to follow our ongoing coverage online. And don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.